Okie doke. This is a game called Courtroom. It belongs to the class of games which find their most florid expression in law, and which includes Wooden Leg, the plea of insanity, and debtor, the civil suit. Clinically, it is most often seen in marital counselling and marital psychotherapy groups. Some marital counselling and marital groups consist of a perpetual game of courtroom in which nothing is resolved since the game is never broken up. In such cases, it becomes evident that the counsellor or therapist is heavily involved in the game without being aware of it. Courtroom can be played by any number, but is essentially three-handed with a plaintiff, a defendant, and a judge represented by husband, wife, and therapist. If played in a therapy group or on TV, the other members of the audience are cast as the jury. The husband begins plaintively, "Let me tell you what my wife did yesterday. She took the blah, 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 etc., etc." The wife responds defensively, "Here is the way it really was. And besides, just before that, he was ... And anyway, at the time, we were both ... etc." The husband adds gallantly, "Well, I'm glad you people have a chance to hear both sides of the story. I only want to be fair. At this point, the counsellor says, judiciously, "It seems to me that if we consider, etc., etc., if there's an audience, the therapist can throw to them with, well, let's hear what the others have to say. Or if the group is already trained, they will play the jury without any instruction from him." Now, the antithesis is when the therapist says to the husband, "You're absolutely right." If the husband relaxes complacently or triumphantly, the therapist asks, "How do you feel about me saying that?" The husband replies, "Fine." Then the therapist says, "Actually, I feel you're in the wrong." If the husband is honest, he will say, "I knew that all along." If he's not honest, he will show some reaction that make it clear a game is in progress. Then it becomes possible to go into the matter further. The game element lies in the fact that whilst the plaintiff is overtly clamouring for victory, fundamentally he knows that he's in the wrong. After sufficient clinical material has been gathered to clarify the situation, the game can be interdicted perhaps, I'm not sure, by a manoeuvre which is one of the most elegant in the whole art of antithetics. The therapist makes a rule prohibiting the use of the third person in the group. Therefore, the members can only address each other as you or talk about themselves as I, but they can't say me. So they can't say, "Let me tell you about him," or "Let me tell you about her." So the couple stop playing games in the group, or they shift into sweetheart, which I'll get to in a moment, or they take up furthermore. Now, furthermore, the plaintiff makes one accusation after the other. The defendant replies to each, "I can explain." The plaintiff pays no attention to the explanation, but as soon as the defendant pauses, he launches into his next interdictment with another furthermore, interdictment, which is followed by another explanation, one typical parent-child interchange. Furthermore is played most intensively by paranoid defendants. Because of their literalness, it is particularly easy for them to frustrate accusers who express themselves in humorous or metaphoric terms. In general, metaphors are the most obvious traps to avoid in a game of furthermore. In its everyday form, Courtroom is easily observed in children as a three-handed game between two siblings and a parent. "Mummy, she took my candy." "Yes, but he took my doll, and before that he was hitting me. And anyway, we both promised to share our candy." And here's the analysis. Analysis thesis. I mean, this is not even a textbook. Thesis. They've got to say, "I'm right." Aim. Reassurance. Roles. Plaintiff, defendant, judge, and or jury. Dynamics. Sibling rivalry. Examples. 1. Children quarrelling, parent intervenes. 2. Marital couples seek help. Social paradigm. Adult. So the first adult. "This is what she did to me." Adult. The real facts are these. Psychological paradigm. Child, parent. Child. "Tell me I'm right." Parent. "This one is right," or "You're both right." Moves. 1. Complaint filed. Defence filed. 2. Plaintiff files rebuttal, concession or goodwill gesture. 3. Decision of judge or instructions to jury. 4. Final decision filed. Advantages. 1. Internal psychological projection of guilt. 2. External psychological, excused from guilt. 3. Internal social, sweetheart, furthermore, uproar and other gains. 4. External social and courtroom. 5. Biological, stroking from judge and jury. 6. Existential, depressive position. I'm always wrong. Now quickly, sweetheart, just explain what that is. This is seen in its fullest flower in the early stages of marital group therapy, when the parties feel defensive. It can also be observed on social occasions. White makes a subtly derogatory remark about Mrs. White, disguised as an anecdote. Ends, "Isn't it right, sweetheart?" Mrs. White tends to agree for 2 ostensibly adult reasons. A, because the anecdote itself is in the main accurately reported, and to disagree about what is presented as a peripheral detail but is really the essential point of the transaction would seem pedantic. B, because it would seem surly to disagree with a man who calls you sweetheart in public. The psychological reason for her agreement, however, is her depressive position. She married him precisely because she knew he would perform this service for her, exposing her deficiencies and thus saving her from the embarrassment of having to expose them herself. Her parents accommodated her in the same way when she was little. Next to courtroom, this is the most common game played in marital groups. The more tense the situation and the closer the game is to exposure, the more bitterly the word sweetheart is enunciated, until the underlying resentment becomes obvious. On careful consideration, it can be seen that this is a relative of Schlemiel again, since the significant move is Mrs. White's implicit forgiveness for Mr. White's resentment, of which she is trying hard not to be aware. Hence, anti-sweetheart is played analogously to anti-Schlemiel. You can tell derogatory anecdotes about me, but please don't call me sweetheart, is what she's saying. The antithesis carries with it the same perils as does anti-Schlemiel. A more sophisticated and less dangerous antithesis is to reply, "Yes, honey." In another form, the wife, instead of agreeing, responds with a similar sweetheart-type anecdote about the husband, saying in effect, "You have a dirty face too, dear." Sometimes the endearments are not actually pronounced, but a careful listener can hear them even when they are unspoken. This is sweetheart silence.